Great. Welcome to Access Denied, the tragic story of 15 million children locked outside the schoolhouse door and how you can help. My name is Dirk and I'll be your host. Today we'll be talking with Garris Stroud and Christina Trosper, two troublemakers, educators, and activists who've been fighting in Kentucky for the thing we all want, internet for all. School is starting. Well, it's kind of starting. For the 15 million unconnected students, it's really not starting. And imagine that a customer service rep at Comcast is the one holding the keys to the schoolhouse door. Have you ever called a cable company? It starts with a line and usually goes downhill from there. A robot will answer your call. Your call is important to us. No, we know it's not. We had a complaint of a parent who spent 13 hours on the phone trying to get connected, and they still couldn't. There has got to be a better way that does not offload the responsibility of access onto kids and families struggling with so many other issues. We need a system where districts, cities, states, and feds and the providers themselves are accountable. This show, Access Denied, chronicles America's digital apartheid, the real world challenges, the costs and solutions, and how you can help. We have nearly 35,000 supporters, including Artie Duncan and Jeb Bush, demanding what should be a basic right, internet for all. That every family that needs it should have free, no strings attached broadband, no strings attached, no social security number needed, no deposit, no prior bill, none of that stuff. No strings attached. We can do this, but we need you. And this is actually happening. Internet for all is a real thing. We told the Chicago story in episode 2, where philanthropy, community, the district, and the city got together and guaranteed free access to every child that needed it year one, and free access to every low-income household that needed it year 2 and forever. That's internet for all. It's free. It's not free or low cost. It's not free with an asterisk. It's free. The same thing. Philly was our first show, and it was a problem story. I think we're getting to the place where Philly's getting a real deal too, and making internet for all a reality. Chattanooga created its own network and just opened it up. So this stuff can happen. It's a matter of us actually making it happen. And today we're going to be talking about rural issues and issues in Kentucky. But before we get there, we need to talk a little big picture solutions, many of which came up on our last couple episodes. First is really, what are our priorities as a country? Where do we put our money? We need to make connections and not war. For $7 to $11 billion, we could completely fix this for kids. Another billion to fix it for the 500,000 teachers that are unconnected. We spend almost $750 billion a year annually on defense. $2 trillion was the original stimulus. $17 billion is line item for Boeing. What Boeing is getting could fix this for every kid and teacher in the United States. Internet is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It should be a right. School's compulsory. We have to go to school. Yet we lock 15 million mostly underserved kids out of the schoolhouse door. We need a universal on-ramp to the information superhighway, not one lined with toll collectors in the form of private broadband companies, modern-day poll taxers, further excluding the most excluded from the opportunity to even participate or grow into full citizens. We owe our babies better, and we will have local solutions on local conditions, but we need national action to actually support those locals in terms of funding and rule changes and how localities can spend dollars. Broadband access is not a red thing. It's not a blue thing. It's not an urban thing. It's not a rural thing. This is something that should bring us all together from sea to shining sea to establish a basic level playing field on internet access for every child that needs it. That's a game where we all win. And we need you all to join in and play. So I want to welcome a couple Wildcats from Kentucky to really help us understand what's happening in Kentucky. What is similar about the challenge we have rural and urban, and really how do we work together as a community to make this work for everybody? So I'd love to thank y'all for coming. I appreciate you joining me, Garris and Christina. Christina, could you just start? I understand you're kind of a troublemaker, and I think we need a little more good trouble out there. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your background, what you do on a daily basis, and kind of what brought you into this weird world of internet access.
So I kind of started my trouble. I kind of always have been a troublemaker. I've always been a little loud. My parents always taught me, speak up for those who don't have a voice.
Yeah.
And I'm a social studies teacher, so that is my heart and soul, especially at the high school level. Teaching kids how they can make change. Kind of got into this activism accidentally, and kind of got mad one day about my pension, and it just kind of started from there, and started realizing how much of an impact we can have. Now moving into the school year and looking at virtual instruction for our students, in rural Appalachia, we're a little different, and that's okay. We talk a little different. We're just a little different, but we're also facing kids who don't have electricity. How do we deal with that? And somebody's been born and raised here. I've seen program after program throwing money, and nobody talking to us, listening to us, listening to what we need. And Charles Booker, who's my hero, he said it best: from the hood to the holler, it's the same. Generational poverty is the same, no matter if you're in an urban area or a rural area. We're plagued with the same things, with drugs, with gun violence, with this generational, no good jobs, and poor education and things like that. It's the same. They try to divide us into rural and urban, but we're the same. We have the same issues.
Yeah, that's right on. And again, it's just so interesting. It's all the same. It really is. Everything you said is the same about Oakland. It's just in a different place and maybe has a little different flavor to it, but the same exact underlying conditions exist, and the same lack of access to opportunity. Garris, I'd love to hear a little bit about you, your background, what you're doing professionally now, and what brought you to this fight.
Absolutely. So thank you, Christina, for those powerful words. And again, I love that phrase, from the hood to the holler. As Christina pointed out, there are so many issues that resound with all of us, or resonate with all of us, regardless of where we come from. And in a world that feels so divided by demographics like rural and urban, it's great when we can come together and coalesce around issues and solutions for kids that can unite us. And I certainly think that access to broadband internet is one of those. So a little bit of information about me. I'm an educator first and foremost. I'm an 8th grade writing teacher. And not only do I teach about writing, but I like to write about teaching as well. I host a blog called Kentucky School Talk, where I write about education issues in Kentucky. I'm a former Kentucky State Teacher Fellow. And as Christina mentioned, I came onto the fellowship around 2017 and did a 2-year stint with the Hope Street Group fellowship there, right about the same time that a lot of issues were really coming to a head in Kentucky, including the pension issues. So advocacy and ed policy is very much my wheelhouse. And right now, amid this pandemic in which we're forced to distance and we can't be in physical schools in so many cases, one of the issues that really should be at the forefront of our minds is internet access. And unfortunately, too many children around Kentucky and in our nation, whether rural or urban, regardless of race or cultural background, they lack that access. And that's what we should be fighting for today.
Yeah. And so has the school year started in Kentucky right now or in your districts?
Teachers have went back in my district.
And what are you hearing from teachers about their readiness for this year, their ability to deliver? And I'd also I'm curious if you're hearing anything about how, like, have you guys done any surveys or any needs assessments with your families around kind of the challenges they might be having? I know we've done COVID surveys out here. I'm curious about what you're finding, what you're hearing from teachers and from families as school's getting ready to start again.
Garris,
absolutely. Well, Kentucky is a pretty diverse state in a lot of ways that a lot of people may not think about. We certainly are a rural state, but we also have urban pockets in places like Louisville, Lexington, and then northern Kentucky right outside of Cincinnati. And we recognize that no two school districts are the same. Solutions that may work for one school district in a rural part of Kentucky amid COVID-19 may not be the best solution for a school district in an urban place or in a suburban district. And so we agree with what you said earlier about the need to get families involved, to get parents involved, and to build that infrastructure around parent and family voice and student and teacher voice for that matter as well. And so Christina and I actually met each other because of a project we've been involved in over the summer. We are 2 of the 9 members of an intergenerational team working with the Pritchard Committee out of Lexington, the Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence, working to really gather these perspectives that students and parents and teachers across our amazing state of Kentucky have in terms of school reopenings, and especially aligned with this need for internet access, because we know that so many students and so many families across Kentucky don't have that. So that's something we're in the middle of right now. We've been surveying parents and families along with educators and administrators throughout the past couple of weeks. We're going to keep doing that here in the coming days. And hopefully sometime toward the end of this month and moving toward the fall, we'll begin to really break that data down, disaggregate it, and push out to our stakeholders, perhaps the Kentucky Department of Education, the Kentucky Board of Education, what we found so that we can have meaningful solutions for those kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think in our district, what I've seen in Louisville, that's Jefferson County, one of their things that they've done is they've really worked with community leaders, especially in what's the West End, which is a more impoverished area of Jefferson County, of Louisville, actually, working with those community leaders to get together to figure out how to kind of bridge that gap. In a small town like mine, you would think that that would be kind of priority number one, and it has not been. And so you're hearing a lot of anxiety from a lot of people just anecdotally on social media and just being in a small town and knowing that we're trying to, like, I know our district wants us to put everything on a flash drive for kids who don't have internet, but that too is kind of odd. But I think we're trying to, but again, without access to internet, it is extremely, extremely hard for our students to get the quality of instruction that we need to get. And that's an issue. It's a major issue here.
Yeah, and it'll just also, inequalities. Go ahead, Garris.
I was also just going to jump off of what she said. That's certainly one solution that I've heard, but in other areas, especially in the rural areas of Kentucky, there are some other solutions that I've heard of school districts using as they try to approach this digital divide in the coming school year. As I've seen around the country, school districts are hiring bus drivers and sending bus drivers throughout the district to set up their buses, park there, and act as a hotspot for students who may not have Wi-Fi. In my district and then around Western Kentucky, where I live and teach, I'm seeing lots of districts that are using their schools' Wi-Fi and boosting their range so that parents and students can go to the parking lots in their cars and safely distance to access their digital assignments that way. So a lot of unique situations and a lot of unique, stopgaps, you can say, are being implemented here in the midst of this really unusual time.
Yeah. And the beauty of these is the local solutions will be good as long as the community is involved in them. Like the Chicago story really was community and philanthropy pushing the district to do the right thing. Rather, again, a lot of money comes into Oakland and goes out of Oakland, and the same kids are still unconnected, and a lot of people get paid in that process. And that's because the community often doesn't have oversight over that money in the way that it needs to. And it's not responsive to the community. It's responsive to kind of a set of systems that often don't really serve the community. So I do think making sure that family voices and educator voices are the ones that actually are holding this accountable and making sure that this is the right thing to do for our community. I'm
sorry to interrupt, but there is I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Owsley County, Kentucky. It's usually it is the poorest county in the nation, and they have probably 4,000 to 8,000 residents. A few years ago, they made sure that every single person in their county, every household, has high-speed internet. So if the poorest county in the United States of America can do that, it's possible to do that everywhere.
Yeah.
And that astounded me, because we all kind of, in Eastern Kentucky, we kind of make fun of each other. So if you tell somebody you're from Owsley County, they're like, oh, Lord, it's rough. And those mountains, there's some big mountains over there, but think about that. And if they're able to do that for their community, I don't know why we can't. I don't know why every community can't do that. It seems to me that it is a way, again, to divide us, to keep those that are poor, still struggling, and, keeping so many opportunities away from our kids and our community. And it is abusive, and it feels really bad.
Yeah.
Well, Christina, I think one of the reasons that Owsley County was able to do that was because of the leadership that was shown several years ago when Kentucky Wired was first announced. Kentucky Wired has had a lot of flaws through the years, and even here in 2020, it's still not complete. And in many cases, I've actually been quite skeptical and quite critical towards the program. But around 2014, our government got together and decided that they wanted to make internet access a priority, that they wanted to lay a wire across the state to form Kentucky's information highway. And while there's been lots of hiccups and even glitches, if you will, along the way to successfully completing Kentucky Wired, I still think that the message holds true. It's amazing what we can do when we have public partners, private partners, and a coalition of people who are all fighting for the right thing. We really can move mountains, and we can move the needle for our kids if only we're willing to try.
Yes.
Yeah. This is not rocket science. It's not even like reading science. It's a matter of laying cables and getting hotspots and devices in the hands of kids and families that need them. And like the example of the poorest county in the entire country can do internet for all. It should kind of put us to shame in terms of everyone else who's not doing it. All the lack of leadership that we see right now across the country with, again, kids just struggling. Like, again, in Oakland, you're going to have to pay for internet, and you need internet to get to school. And as you said, Christina, you have families without electricity. We have families who can't pay their electricity bills. And now they're going to have to make a choice between, do I pay my medicine? Do I get electricity? Do I do a payday loan and hope to figure that out? Do I get my kid to school? And those are just choices. As the richest country in the history of the world, we shouldn't make our families make those choices. They don't need to make those choices. We failed them to the extent that we're making them make those choices. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more. Just tell me about your families and your kids, and how. When did you go virtual in Kentucky? Did you in the spring semester? Did you guys cut off early? And then what happened? Tell me a little bit about kind of the experience that folks were experiencing then.
I'm laughing because it was wild.
Yeah, well, the Wildcats were wild. Yeah.
We had, I think Governor Andy Beshear, who is a saint, came out, I think on the 11th or 12th and said, okay, you're going to have 72 hours to figure out what you're going to do. So the last day, it was Friday, March 13th, was the last day that I saw my students, and we had to just turn it on a dime. We had to try and take what was normal instruction, what we were doing, try to get it online for the kids who had internet access, but then you were having to do paper packets and other things for kids who didn't have internet access. It was chaos. Absolutely. It was so chaotic that I know in my district, we said, okay, look, their NTI, their non-traditional, their digital learning work is going to only increase their grade. It cannot decrease their grade because we recognize that it just wasn't the quality that we needed to do. Yep. And sadly, I think every teacher in this state knew that we were not going to be going back to full in person come August.
Yeah.
My district, we're usually back by August 2nd, August 3rd, usually our first day of school. And we all recognize that, but it was like the leadership, I think, didn't realize that, or I guess they thought the pandemic would be gone. But, and right now we're not really scrambling, but I think most teachers have spent the summer seeking out resources, looking to do things, knowing, okay, this is a possibility. And so right now our governor issued a recommendation that we do not go attempt in-person classes until September 28th. Most school districts are doing a hybrid plan, like you can go 2 days a week in person and then 3 days online. And then you have a certain group comes on A days, another group comes on B days. It's a lot of working parts and a lot of moving parts. And it's interesting. And there are a lot of unknowns. I did a podcast about a week or so ago with a group, and they're like, well, what do you need? I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, Garris is way more articulate than I am about this stuff because I'm just like living my life, trying to smoke my cigarettes and drink my coffee and Dr. Pepper. And I'm just like, trying to make sure my own children survive because it was horrible. Like trying to help them with their work in March, I about pulled my hair out. And so since I knew that they couldn't decrease their grade, we just kind of gave up. And I just said, you know what? We're just going to play outside.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah. No more stress. Garris, you have thoughts?
Yes, certainly. So I think right now where we are is such an interesting time. The governor has made the recommendation that all schools close for in-person and remain with digital or remote learning until September 28th. By and large, we're seeing districts adopt that. That has been, it was a recommendation. It was not an executive order. And so our understanding of that is that is an issue of local control. And so boards of education across Kentucky have been meeting and are currently meeting. In my district, I'm not certain that there has been a consensus on what we're doing, so I'm awaiting further information on that. But it seems as though the majority are going to follow the governor's recommendation and close for in-person learning, delay their openings until September. And so that leaves us with an interesting situation because many families who were planning for in-person instruction are not going to be getting that for quite some time. In fact, some districts have already voted to cease in-person instruction or delay the start of in-person instruction through October because of fall break and different scheduling needs. And so we're at an unusual time right now because we expect that there will be heightened accountability for both staff and students. We were scrambling back in the spring. To some extent, I think across the nation, educators are scrambling because of just this unique time that we're in, but not to the same extent that we were in the spring. We've had some time to plan for this. We know there has to be additional accountability. And so we don't know what that might look like if districts are using their CARES money to purchase Chromebooks and laptops, but the families at home don't have internet. And I will say I applaud a lot of the work that's been done in Eastern Kentucky because Kentucky Wired, which was the program we were talking about earlier, essentially started in Central and Eastern Kentucky and has been more or less working its way west. And so we've seen a lot of homes and businesses and different things of that nature hooking up to Kentucky Wired. And now that expanded broadband is there. But that's not necessarily the case in Western Kentucky, where, for example, in my home county of Muhlenberg, Kentucky Wired has not yet laid fiber optic wire or cable here yet. And so there still are a great number of families without internet. So it remains to be seen how that will be handled. But that's an issue, again, that we have to bring families, we have to bring educators and leaders and administrators together to have those very bold conversations.
Yeah. And so I'd love to hear a little more about Kentucky Wired. Like that actually sounds like a relatively visionary program in the early 2014 or whatever. It's now 2020, 6 years later. And it sounds like I'd love to hear I read some about, but I'd love to hear as educators, like how, and folks who live there, how have you experienced that? And why isn't it working better potentially?
There's no experience here. And are you sure that Owsley County was part of Kentucky Wired? Because I thought that was a private entity that did that. I think even before Kentucky Wired, but Kentucky Wired was I think, was it Steve Bashir? I think
Kentucky Wired was Steve Bashir. Yeah. So Kentucky Wired started in Central and Eastern Kentucky. Yes. Now, Owsley County specifically, I do think that was a community project. I don't think they were Kentucky Wired. But the goal of Kentucky Wired is to have that wire that can be accessed across the state. And we can kind of talk about what that may look like here in a little bit.
It's pretty much, I'll be honest with you, it's kind of like this big kind of pipe dream, but it's been with contracts, and there's been a lot of delays with that. It's turned into this political issue. Steve Bashir was a Democrat, so of course our Republican supermajority has attacked everything about Kentucky Wired, calling it corrupt, it is just, they turned it into a political issue. So instead of really looking at and figuring out what needs to be done, the Republicans use it as a way to attack the Democrats. The Democrats then get mad at the Republicans and say that they're, stopping this project. It's been overextended. There was issues about how was it funded. So pretty much it's like supposed to be there. Like we were supposed to already have that up in every community, and it's just not. It's just not there because, again, politicians turned it into a political football. They're all kind of tossing back and forth rather than doing the work of the people, which is kind of the biggest issue that we're seeing.
Well, I think pretty much any major issue like this, because let's be honest, Kentucky Wired was basically a moonshot initiative when it was first launched. But any kind of policy that goes through 3 different gubernatorial administrations is bound to end up as a political football. So it did start with Governor Steve Bashir. I think the groundwork was really late in 2014, but it had been conceptualized before that. It made its way through Republican Governor Matt Bevin's term. Now, Andy Bashir, a Democrat, is our governor, Steve Bashir's son. So there's that familial relationship. Of course, we've gone across Democrats and Republicans. So it's bound to end up being political. The idea of Kentucky Wired was, let's lay this fiber optic cable across the state from one end to the other. and then it'll act as an information highway or a middle mile network, as it was called. And the idea was that middle mile was like the highway that ISP companies or internet service provider companies could then go through and lay additional cable connecting Kentucky Wired to homes for families and students. And so I think that's the second issue, Christina, too. Not only has it become a political football, but we're also passing some responsibility off of our government and the leaders of Kentucky Wired to the ISPs to actually connect homes to that middle mile. And I think Dirk will agree with me, throughout this entire pandemic, we've seen ISP companies, by and large, cannot be trusted to do the right thing for low-income families and families of color.
Let's be honest. Can any of them? I mean, when it comes to people of color and it comes to low income, and then if you're low income and a person of color, I mean, it is, as a history teacher, it reminds me of the Gilded Age, right? Like, you have these corporations that are making these mass amounts of money, but I'm sitting here with kids who last year when we asked them why they were coming late to school, they were sleeping in a field. They were sleeping in a field on nights that it was warm. And how do you do that? How do you do that? And then I'm supposed to expect them to have internet. So you have these corporations that profit off us, and at the same time turn around and these basic skills. I mean, internet at this point is basically like air and water. I mean, everything you need to do, you need internet access for. Yeah. And everybody talks about, at least in this pandemic we have the internet. No, they don't. Rich people do.
Yeah.
Class people. I'm lucky that, I have internet. It's expensive. I think we pay, and I don't have the top one. I think we pay like $80 a month for access to the internet. And that's insane. I mean, we're two teachers. We're still paycheck to paycheck, but I can't imagine my students who, they don't know where their next meal's coming from. They're depending on the school for that, but they're supposed to pay $80 a month for internet. And then they were like, we'll give free internet for so many weeks. But then if you had bad credit or you had this or you had that, again, people who are poor have bad credit or no credit. And just like you said, then do you go to a finance company? Do you go to a payday loan? And then that cycle over and over. Yeah. And I do believe until we stand up as people, until we demand that our community buy into this idea that it is absolutely necessary, we're going to continue to see it. And I think that is by design. I'm not going to get all conspiracy theory, but I do believe it's by design. Keep us dumb, my dad used to say about working in the coal mines. I like to keep you dumb so you'd be willing to go back underground. And it's kind of the same thing. And it's frustrating. It's horribly frustrating. And I don't know how, it's like I was talking about my district today. I'm probably going to end up fired, but that's okay. I did a Facebook Live about the fact that, you walk in Eastern Kentucky, you can't walk 5 feet without running smack dab into a Baptist church. I mean, they're everywhere. Mm-hmm. Are the churches working with our schools? Are they working, these community partners? Are they coming to the schools and saying, hey, this is what we can do. This is what we can provide? That's non-existent. And that's inexcusable. So it's so many layers, right? And we know that. But if you just did something as simple as equal access to internet, that solves a lot of issues, and that takes away one layer. And that is something that people don't understand. People still see internet as a luxury. Like they see a cell phone as a luxury. Like I live in deep red. God help me. I'm this little tiny blue dot, like Obama phones, right? No, it's a Reagan phone. But anyway, like I said, how do you get a job interview if they can't call you?
Thank you.
How do you deal with those things if you don't have a phone? And the reason why you do a cell phone and not a landline is because you have to move so much because you can't. And so you have all of these underlying social issues that if you just did one thing, providing internet and equal access to that internet for all people solves a lot of those issues. And that's huge. And people don't see it like that. They still view it. I think it's because it's people 40 and over. When we first had internet, that was a luxury, right? Yeah. You had dial up, you had that AOL, that beeping. You were fancy. Yeah. And so that issue has that I think the people who are making policy, they still see that. They see it as a luxury. They see a cell phone as a luxury. They see a TV. I mean, I think they would see TV as a luxury, which I don't have cable. I had to get that off. It was way too expensive. Yeah. So, I mean, I wish I could see more of that and the community demanding that instead of demanding it from their public schools, demanding from the schools, from the churches, from our economic. We have what's called KCEOC, which is part of that, war on poverty from Lyndon Johnson. And all of those things, where is that at? And there's no leadership there. And so I think it is going to be up to us to demand. And I'm hoping that all of the holes that we're seeing were these little tiny pinholes that are now gaping holes during this pandemic, that we'll finally as a society say, okay, let's fill these in. Let's fill these in and let's do one thing that we can do at a time. And internet is huge. That's key.
I'm so glad you said that, Christina, because Dirk and I have talked about this before. This powerful image of the floodgates with all of these holes in the floodgates and the water is just crashing through. And God bless all of the partners, public, private, whatever, that are working to fill in these holes in the floodgates. But unfortunately, they're just sticking their fingers in the hole with no hopes of a long-term solution. I'm watching the activity in the comments here. Andrew's comment is absolutely on point. Having schools and districts try to close the digital divide is not sustainable. It's not possible. God bless the districts that are trying to do that work, but it's not their responsibility. It goes back to the leaders. It goes back to the corporations. We know that we can do it. Let's do it. Let's do this for our kids.
Yes. And it goes back to all of those things, right? All of these things in society that the schools have shouldered, mental health counseling, they cut social workers. So we take on more of a role of a social worker and police and disciplinary and all of these things when my only real job is to educate students. And I'm having to do so much more. And we do that because teachers by nature, that's who we are. We're carers and we're caretakers. And we care about the whole child. But what we're seeing right now is everything that society has ignored and has pushed aside and pushed aside and pushed aside. They can't push it aside. So they need somebody to blame. So they're blaming us as teachers because, why not?
Yeah. And now you're chief technology officer too. And making sure kids can get online and know how, so it really is that there's a new line added to the job description about every year. For teachers without any real thought about how that detracts from all the other things folks need to do. I really love the inequality discussion. I'd love it if we can bring up the map of the divide, Josh, and just show that, this should not be a red or a blue issue. When you look at the places that have the lowest internet connectivity, those are typically the red states there with the darker purple. And so, to me, basic access to the economy, like if you're a Republican and you believe in economic growth, folks need to be connected to the internet. And I also just wanted to bring the piece you said, like coal miner education. Again, for Black folks, it was sharecropper education, just enough so you can be a sharecropper, but not much more than that, where you're going to demand more than sharecropper wages and sharecropper rights. And that's the system that we kind of have doled out to kids. It's like there's a set of kids who get a serf's education. And that's the role they'll play in the modern economy. Like what job are you going to have if you don't have, you never used the word processor. You've never connected to the internet. You don't know anything about basic data entry. Like you can be a busboy, but not much more than that. And so I just think this basic access to all the riches that this country has to offer, that's an easy way to do it. Level the playing field on just getting into the schoolhouse door. And then what kids do and how hard they work once they're that there's a whole lot of other things tied in that, but at least get these kids in the damn door.
Yeah, they have the opportunity, right? Like, you know, I have kids, and my hope is not that I teach them a bunch of random facts about history, but teach them a love of learning why things are the way they are. And I need them to be able to explore that on their own.
Yeah.
I'm always telling them, use every tool you have, because some teachers will be like, oh, I don't want you to Google it. And I'm like, Google it. If I see something that you didn't know, Google it. You know, I mean, and it is. It shouldn't be a political issue, but it is. Because we have one group who says, pull yourself up from your bootstraps. Well, if you don't have the internet, you don't have boots. So how am I
Thank you.
supposed to pull them up? You know, if
Thank
I don't have boots on my feet, how does that work? And, you know, it is about equal access. It is about equity. It is about opportunity. Now, whatever you do with that opportunity is up to you. But if I can even provide that opportunity to you, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And, you know, in the society, we look at how many people are working from home. Like my son works at a call center and he loves it because he works from home. And so he was going to be the one that was going to stay home with my kids. And, you know, it's just been, I think about that and I think about his job and, you know, how he's able to remain safe because he has internet.
Yeah.
You know, and the people who don't have internet had to come into the building and work. And there's a lot of people in that building, more than I would have thought would have been in that building. And there's so much about it that it is about, you know, social inequity. It is about discrimination. And it is about, let's be honest, it's about keeping us, you know, we're underneath their thumb where they want us to be. And it's sad that people would do that and then say, oh, well, it's because those people aren't willing to work. And that's not right.
That's the most,
like Dirk was saying earlier, if you don't have internet access, what meaningful work can you really do? I mean, not to say that there's not meaningful work outside of internet-based jobs, but you have to be able to apply for them, right? I mean, you can't even really apply for a job if you don't have internet. Going back to Dirk's comment, though, I want to go back to that. My grandfather was a Kentucky coal miner. He dropped out of school after 6th or 7th grade, right? He did not have a formal education, but because he had the skills to go out and work, and he worked hard, he worked with his hands, he was able to enter the economic mainstream because coal mining used to be a pretty good job here in the Western Kentucky coal fields. Because of that, and because of his passion for his work ethic, he sent my mom to school. She was the first in our family to graduate from high school, let alone college. And now that set the stage for me to go to college, and I'll be the first in our family to graduate with a doctoral degree, okay? Because of that work ethic, because of public education, right? But that does not exist today if you don't have a stable internet access. If you don't have internet access, you cannot enter the economic mainstream, period.
Yeah. You're locked out. You're literally locked out. And again, we see the kids that are locked out are the kids that have always been locked out. It is this intergenerational thing that just continues. And the thing that just bothers me about this is it's completely fixable. And it actually is leveling. Like again, everybody needs this. If you've had internet problems since the pandemic struck, even, you know, just your internet before I just trying to get on this call, I was having an internet problem. You know, you're done. Even just with having problems with internet, not even to mention not being able to get on. You can't do telehealth. So you need to go to the physical place where you might get sick to actually see if you're sick. You know, it just, there's so many implications right now, and it is the air and water right now. It is the indoor plumbing. It is the phone in every farm that Truman promised. And we need a new deal around this that actually commits that a connection in every home or whatever they want to call it. And it's totally doable. We run a cable underneath the Atlantic Ocean to do internet fiber optics. And so we're saying we can't connect folks up. And I think I don't want to ramble here, but I do think that church piece was really important. Someone brought up, I do think we do need these community organizations really buying it. Again, if there's a church on every block, why can't we put a hotspot in every church and just open that up for open broadband? There are ways, the creative ways with the buses. I just think there are stopgap measures to kind of fill the void right now while we figure out the long-term answer, which is just, to me, it's like a promise that you have a right to access. And it's not up to a cable company. You know, cable companies are going to get paid. Cable companies are going to get rich in the pandemic. And they're going to put on more customers with higher speeds than they ever had in the long-term contracts. Like, they're going to get rich. They already are rich. And that's fine for them to get a little something out of this, but they got to give a little more. And I think that's where we got to just keep pushing on them. It's like, you can't deny.
And what they're doing is so hypocritical, though. I mean, think back to the onset of the pandemic when you saw all of these companies like AT&T and like Comcast that were coming on social media with their virtue signaling, saying that they stood with low-income students and families, and that they were going to expand internet access for those families amid COVID-19 because their kids had to be online to do their remote learning. And yet there were all of these strings attached where if you had an outstanding debt, that rule did not apply to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly how I got started. A parent reached out to me. They're like, oh, I tried to sign up for Comcast free internet. And they said I couldn't. And so it's like, okay, let's call Comcast out on this crap. Like, that's garbage. This is a pandemic. Y'all are rich. Like, you need to open up. You need to give something back to this country that you've taken so much from and be actually a corporate citizen rather than a corporate exploiter. And we need a federal government that actually holds these folks accountable to that. Again, they do that in other situations. They do that to phone companies and make them provide Lifeline. Yeah. They don't do that with the broadband companies and make them do anything. All of them signed this pledge, Keep America Connected. Meanwhile, everybody getting disconnected, and no one can get connected who don't have money, don't have a deposit, doesn't have a social security card, owed a debt before, had prior service in 60 months. There's all these things, like you said.
It's the criminalization, the continued criminalization of poverty.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, that's right on.
And people don't understand that. If you haven't lived in, like, I grew up, my parents, it was a struggle. I'm the first person in my entire family to go to college. Yeah. And my papa left here. He's that great migration from the mountains to the factories in Detroit. I mean, that's my papa. Uh-huh. He's gone now. But, I mean, without that, I don't know what I would have done. But I still don't understand why they all grew up in Detroit and I grew up here. But anyway, when you live around poverty, it is a state of mind. Yeah. Even though I'm not impoverished now, like I can pay my bills for the most part, I'm still in poverty. I have $700-800 a month that my husband and I pay in student loan bills. But because, we went to sign up for the 120 payments for public service forgiveness. Oh, well, 10 payments he paid one day late. So he couldn't qualify.
With you, I had that same type thing.
I mean, and it's crazy. And I'm like, and I try to tell people, I'm like, do you know what I could do to the economy? When you talk about providing internet service, what if I took $500 a month and I helped pay for somebody's internet? Mm-hmm. What if I did that just as a regular person instead of paying student loan? There are so many things that we are, and I do believe we're in a rough spot right now, but I do believe we are the greatest country in the world. We have the potential to be. Yeah. Again, if we continue to criminalize poverty, if we're locking kids out of the schoolhouse who don't have internet, if we're not ensuring that there's equal opportunity, then there's no equality, there's no freedom, because you don't have that. And when you're talking about public school, I mean, let's be honest, it was set up to educate citizens. It was set up to educate people to be productive citizens. That's why they have to take civics. That's why they have to take U.S. history, so that they understand who we are and what we stand for. And we have to instill in them and in our community that the things that, Congress, look at Congress. It's a bunch of old white people who think that the internet is luxury, and it's not. And until they understand that, we will still be in this problem. Because if we're not doing it at a local level because of corruption and cronyism. And, where I live, it's interesting, and giving, Bubba's uncle, the contract to do this or do that. And, it's crazy. So we have to have some sort of leadership. If we can't get it at the local level, if we can't get it at the state level because of roads, then we have to look to the federal government for that. Yeah. And that's where you can't do it at the local, and people say, oh, well, that's a local decision. Well, when the local government doesn't speak for you, go to the state. You go to the federal. And then after you go to the federal, you're lost. So if you have people there who'll sign a pledge but won't actually do anything meaningful, then we're right back to what we've been talking about. Yeah. Actually, Garris was saying that the survey that we did, you have to have the internet to do the survey. You had to have the internet to access to get to this survey. Yeah. So, I'm pleading with teachers all over the state, and those that work at, where they have communities, especially, Latin American communities where, they don't speak English, making sure that we're getting that Spanish version to them. But then I'm like, oh, crap, we don't have the internet, so there's all of these things. So then even I look at our survey, and it only is pulling from those people who have internet. We don't know about those who don't, which we're going to get a large sample. Don't get me wrong. I think that will not flaw the survey, but I do feel like that's an issue too. To have your voice heard, you have to have the internet.
Yeah, we have the same thing, and it's like the dog that doesn't bark. In some ways, it doesn't mean that dog isn't there. It's just the dog's not barking because we don't have a way to listen to them. If they, we did the same thing, and I was like, wow, people felt pretty good about online instruction. That sounds a lot different than what I actually hear when I talk to families. And I'm like, oh, these are the people who have internet who felt pretty good about it. Like the folks who got packets coming home didn't feel quite as good about it. Or a zip drive coming home versus instruction where you can actually ask your teacher questions. I love that. So we're getting ready to wrap up. This is about usually where we go. I'd love for y'all. This has been really incredible. I'm inspired by both of y'all and just the continuing fight locally for justice and equity. I really appreciate both of you engaging in that and in different places, but we're in the same place ultimately. So I'd love to hear from y'all. A, what would it mean if we actually provided internet for all to everyone? And B, do you have any kind of final thoughts, parting words for the audience?
Garris, you're better at this than I am.
I don't know about that.
Oh, shenanigans. No.
He is so polished. I love to hear him talk. Go, Garris.
Oh, it's all a front. Well, I'll tell you, Dirk, here's what it means to me. If we can provide internet for all, it means we're going to give our kids a fighting chance. We know that education matters. Public education matters. We need our kids to be in school somewhere, somehow, whether that's in a physical building or at home doing their remote learning, because that's learning too. I don't care what anybody says. Even if the schools aren't physically open to the kids, the teachers are working, the schools are open. We need our kids learning. Because one day we want them to enter the economic mainstream. We want them to be able to achieve success, whatever that may look like to them. And in this modern world we're living in, especially amid a global pandemic, it's essential that students and families have internet to make that happen. Yeah. So by giving them internet for all and by fighting for internet for all, we're just giving them a fighting chance. And to answer the second part of your question, let me just kind of follow up with, to make that happen, we're going to need a new deal. We need a new deal for Kentucky. We need a new deal for rural Americans who feel completely logged out and disenfranchised from this discourse. It's going to take a lot of players. It's going to take local actors, as we've discussed. It's going to take state actors. I saw earlier this week or last week where Bridget Blom-Ramsey of the Pritchard Committee called for Andy Beshear, our governor, to launch a working group to tackle the digital divide in Kentucky. Let me double down and just say that call is absolutely correct. We need a working group in Kentucky to tackle this issue. Let's get Kentucky wired up as soon as possible. It's scheduled to be up and running 100% of the way in October, but by then, students will be back. Let's speed this up. It should have been done 4 years ago. Let's expand internet access in Kentucky, and then let's show them how to do it across rural parts of this entire country. It's imperative that our kids have internet access. It's going to give them a fighting chance, and we have to lead the way.
Amen. That's so good.
Appreciate that.
Listen, Kentucky gets a bad rap, but I'm telling you right now, there are some heavy duty progressives in this state, and we have a tendency to kind of, because nobody really expects much from us, they all think we're all hillbillies, that we do have a tendency to kind of shoot for the moon like we did with Kentucky Wired and things like that. And we have this opportunity. I think Kentucky's right for it. I think we can do it. And I think that this pandemic is showing that. And I'm proud. I'm proud of my state. I'm proud of what we're doing. And I know it's possible. And, I'm just glad that you're giving voice to that, because that's what we need. We need people to hear our voices. And I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate both of you. I really do. And I appreciate this conversation. Like, I've loved this. And I do, we should be all on the same team right now, really, literally on the same team in pushing for what should just be a basic floor of being an American, of being here in this country, the ability to connect. So thank you, Garris. Thank you, Christina. Y'all can follow them. If there is some way that folks can get connected around this, the working group or whatever, we'd be happy to share that out. Or if there's things that we can push our audience on that can help you guys in Kentucky, we'd love to do that. We need a new deal. We really do need to update the new deal to the digital age. And I appreciate that. So thank you. to the folks out there, we really want you to get involved. So you can sign up for our group that'll be pushing this stuff out. We are doing a national day of action across several cities on August 26th. We'll have a toolkit for locals if they want to get involved in that and push that. There is a tribal issue out there right now that we want folks to protect. The tribes have an opportunity to bid for their own spectrum, and they're just looking for an extension of time on that, given COVID, to make sure that they can put in strong apps. So we'd love folks to sign that letter and send that out. We also have 35,000 folks signing our petition on Internet for All, and we want folks to continue to push that out, sign that. We want to get to 100,000 and get that up to the FCC and the Congress and really push them on this issue. The FCC can do this if they want to. They can regulate cable companies. They've chosen not to. They've chosen to let it be a Wild West where the companies can do what they want, charge what they want, put restrictions on as they want, connect who they want, disconnect who they want. That doesn't have to be the law. These are the public's airwaves. They're not owned by the cable companies. Right now they own them, but they're the public airwaves. And so the public has a right to demand action and demand that cable companies actually treat it like a utility. So the FCC can do that, and your local congressperson actually runs the FCC. So you can contact them to push the FCC on this too. I really appreciate you all for being here and really helping me learn more about the rural issues and really how they're exactly the same. And so thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.